Unconference presentation, our one and only this time around.
Can you see that?
We can.
All right, I'm going to try and keep it quite light and keep it brief. I just wanted to bring to people's attention a new product that we've been working on here at IOTech. We've just launched that, in fact, and it's very much related to EdgeX, in particular about deploying and orchestrating EdgeX systems. It's a product called Edge Builder. But I'd like to kind of briefly explain some context, a little bit about how it works, and then I'm going to run a small demo for you guys. So, as I said, a little bit of context is that IOTech have been in the Edge platform space for a while, as you know, obviously EdgeX, and we have our value-add product called Edge Expert, and we've also moved into real-time and resource-constrained environments with EdgeXRT. And the technology is great, EdgeX technology, but what we've seen certainly is that to some extent, the success of the products depends on people's ability to deploy those, particularly at scale. So, how do you get your applications out to the edge? How do you plan to monitor and manage those over time? And in the first place, how do you even get the computers and gateways onboarded and part of your platform? So the problem gets harder as the number of nodes and devices grow. So we've got several customers who are comfortable in smaller environments, maybe a handful of deployments on each site, which can be even done by hand, and so it's not so onerous. But as we get more and more into the scale, the difficulty gets way harder. So obviously, we've just touched on a few of these things. There's Kubernetes is obviously a high-profile candidate for this sort of thing, but it doesn't address all of the problem. Kubernetes is more about the application clustering rather than edge management, I would say, as a whole. So it doesn't consider onboarding your devices, for example, and managing the actual edge devices. More about the application level. And there's a few other technologies around, but they don't seem to address all of those things. And we try to be open and run on all nodes, work with all clouds, all those sorts of things, the same things that EdgeX tries to bring in. So that's where we're kind of coming from. We worked initially with a product called VMware Pulse, which you guys may know of or may be aware of. That had some good features, but ultimately struggled with scalability in particular, and it was eventually shelved. So we decided to create our own, basically, a bit like EdgeX, building on top of open source software wherever we could. So the two main parts, as I kind of touched on already, is the node or your device management. And we call that prepping the box. That's everything to do with getting your device connected up, onboarded securely, identification, managing firmware and updates, all that sort of stuff. And then the second part is the application management, kind of getting the bits to the box. So, as I said, EdgeX Foundry is certainly a good candidate of application software there. And as I said, our Edge Expert product and EdgeXRT. But also, we're trying to support third-party products as well. So AWS Greengrass, and EdgeX isn't the only thing. So there are other edge software solutions that could be deployed. So we're trying to satisfy those as well. So a couple of graphics: onboarding and provisioning nodes, installing the OS and the infrastructure software, firmware updates, like I said, the whole security and protection of those, runtime monitoring their health and status of these nodes. So those are kind of all of the main aspects. On the management side, or application management side, deploying and orchestrating the edge apps, and certainly containerization, Docker and Kubernetes and things help there. But adapting and tuning configs to different deployments is a factor. The need to start and stop and update the apps, like they can have independent life cycles, the applications themselves, monitoring their health, and then sometimes provisioning the sensors and devices that are part of those application deployments. There's a lot to bite off, if you like. So to introduce Edge Builder, as I said, this is a product that we've been working on. It's now launched and available on our website to trial and download. And basically, we're trying to aim for this scalable way to manage edge systems. We're actually, because we're an edge company, we're very much focused on that, and scale and lightweightness is a key tenet. Yeah, so the thin edge, resource constraints, these are all things that in the forefront of our minds in developing this software. Building on open source tech, as I said, is certainly one of our other key tenets. And the idea for the customer or the user is to be able to really get their solutions out there quicker, being able to automate everything more, greatly reducing the manual and on-site setup and the whole config management stuff. Being able to run on-premise or in the cloud as well, private and public. So again, vendor neutral in that respect. So on the right-hand side, there's a little diagram. Edge Builder consists of two parts. There's a server side, which would probably run in the cloud or on-premise, and that server communicates with edge nodes, or like edge agents, if you like, that can be deployed onto each child node. And it's basically those things: managing, monitoring, provisioning. They're the three major things. Being able to run on any type of node, so right down to MCUs, but also gateways and servers, and being able to deploy containerized and non-containerized apps. So we're trying to go for the full stack there. More detail on that, and this is where I'll point out the open source software that we base on. So at the server side, a whole host of open source components are part of this. So Postgres, Salt, InfluxDB, Grafana, Portainer, for example, they're all parts of the system. And basically at the node side, the agent is built on top of the Salt minion, which is able to it's lightweight and it's able to deploy apps quite well. And then we use Influx and Telegraph and Portainer edge agent to support the kind of metrics and the other infrastructure stuff. So I've got a demonstration. So let me set the scene a little. This is the EdgeX, or in fact it's EdgeXpert, but as you know, EdgeXpert is a value add or commercial implementation of EdgeX, so it's the same fundamental aspects. And in our little application here, it's a classic use case. It's data acquisition from Modbus and OPC UA, devices and sensors. The data is fed up through the layers of EdgeX. Well, this is an EdgeXpert diagram, but you'll see it looks pretty similar to the EdgeX layers. We've added, we've got an edge visualization component via Grafana. So we're going to run a dashboard at the edge, and we're going to stream to a cloud, in this case, AWS. So, like I say, that's a classic use case of what EdgeX is really good at, which is great, but how to deploy that at scale. So I've actually got a video rather than a live demo, but it should be the same effect. So oops, I'm going to play this, and I'm going to commentate over it. That's okay. Yeah, so like I said, we're really looking at running Edge Builder to deploy EdgeXpert, and particularly focusing on how we can do that at scale. So this is the architecture of the demonstration. And as I said, you've got the server side and the remote node side. In this case, it is just a single node I'm going to manage, but it could be hundreds or thousands. It's quite orthogonal, as you'll see in the demo. The server's can run it in the cloud or on-premise. And basically, we're going to use the Edge Builder CLI to interface with the Edge Builder server component. Now, we are working on a UI, but as you see in the demo, hopefully, the CLI is quite clear, and it's a relatively lightweight and thin mapping on top of that, or on top of the server, to create a full user interface. So the server side communicates with the Edge node, as I said, where there's a little agent running, and we're going to basically push down EdgeXpert onto there. And you only need three things really to describe this. You need a JSON file for a node config, a JSON file for the app definition config, and then a Docker Compose file that describes that in more detail. And finally, just to point out that in this case, we're running Modbus and OPC UA simulators because, well, those are the data sources. But in a those are already running on my node. I'm not planning to use Edge Builder to control those. They're assumed to be like the engine, or it's the real device, so they wouldn't be under the remit of Builder anyway. Okay, so if I go over to the node config view, you can see it's, as I said, it's just a JSON file, and it's just a mapping of, or a list of the node, an IP address, and any login credentials like a username and password. And on the screen here, on the left-hand side, we've got the master node, and on the right-hand side, the child node, which, as I said, has already got that's a Modbus simulator on the top left and an OPCUA server on the right there. So we're going to use the CLI, as I said, to control this. So you don't need to use sudo actually in this case, but you can ignore that. But we're doing Edge Builder node add of that config that I just said, and that's been added successfully. And then we can do node view. Okay, and we can see that it's deploying, and then you run node view again, and it's up. So that was all we needed to do in order to basically get our node onboarded, and it's now under the control of Edge Builder from the server side. Okay. So an application that's defined by an app definition config, which is just a name, an optional description, and a reference to a compose file. So obviously that's going to be very EdgeX centric. You know all about that. Basically just all the details to do with the deployment. We've talked about that enough over this week. So everything you need to do with the application as well. So including the AWS certificates and anything like that. So the next phase is to register that application. So app definition add, we'll pass a reference to that, pass that file in. And we can view. Same process. So you can see that a graphical interface is an easy fit on top of this. The next job is to create that application on a node. And this is perhaps the key part. I'll pause for a second. You can see that we're basically doing a mapping of applications to nodes. So in this case, I've only got one node, but that could be a list of nodes, or it could be a group of nodes. We have a concept of a group. So you can additionally define, like, put 100 nodes into one group, and then in one go, you can do that app create function. It'll deploy that to all those nodes. And we do the view again. So we'll just see those are being pushed down. In fact, this is where it's a little bit decoupled because the application is on that node now, but it's stopped. So we have a separate life cycle. So they're decoupled. So we now need to do an app start on that. The next command is to do app start, and then we'll use the ID of that application. And then we run another command, a view command, and we'll just check the status of that. It's starting, and after a couple of seconds, it's running. Okay, so that's the whole EdgeX or EdgeXpert node deployed. And then we jump over to Amazon, and we can see that the Amazon Shadow is running. So thanks to the app service has done its job, and it's streaming up to the cloud. And you can also have a look at the Grafana dashboard, which is set up. So you look there, this is at the edge, that .11 is the edge IP address. So we're just verifying that Grafana was started up and all of our data's registered. And that's the kind of dashboard you'd expect to see with the Modbus and OPCUA data being collected through the device services. So that's it really. I hope that's kind of clear. It's to basically just state again, that's all ran from the Edge Builder CLI with no manual intervention on that Edge node itself. There's one more thing in that we have node statistics. So on the server, remember I mentioned using Influx and Telegraph. So Edge Builder node is able to push up its statistics, its CPU usage, memory usage, and number of containers and so on. They're all presented up on the server for viewing. And that's the end of that video. Let me go back to the slides briefly. Yeah. Quick mention of a customer that's rolling this out. So we're working with a company called PMY, who manage sports venues. So they have something like 500 sports venues under their control, ranging from the Olympics and tennis competitions. And basically they're using our whole stack, Edge Expert, which is based on EdgeX, and the Edge Builder platform, as I said, to manage and orchestrate those. That's a pretty exciting use case. And just a quick slide to summarize, in that Edge Builder aims to address the unique requirements of deploying and monitoring these edge nodes and applications at scale. That applies equally to EdgeX, Edge Expert, Edge XRT, and also third-party software, whether it's containerized or not. That's it, guys. I think hopefully you found that interesting.
James, great demo, great presentation.